We're at 12:01 right now. Welcome to the Tell Me More lecture series. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes, let people trickle in, and then we'll get started. Again, welcome. We'll just wait one more minute till 12:03, and then we will begin. All right, welcome to the Tell Me More lecture series. Today, the topic is the UDNF, Centering Patients in Diagnosis, Research, and Care. Stephanie Tomlinson and I are the UDN PEER co-chairs, and we are hosting a discussion and presentation on UDNF, and we're so excited to have the founding members of the UDNF, Megan Halley, Troy Evans, Helene Sederoth, and I'll also say Stephanie, unfortunately, is having some technical difficulties, which is why her camera is off. So her live picture may pop on if it corrects itself, but just wanted to let everyone know that. But I think we'll start with introductions. If the three of you, Megan, Troy, and Helene, would just kind of introduce yourselves and give people some context about who you are and where you are in the rare disease world. Megan, do you want to go?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah and Stephanie, and thanks so much to the UDN Peer Group for inviting us to talk to you all today about the UDN Foundation. When we were talking about preparing for this lecture, we were saying it feels a little bit like birthing a baby because this has been such a labor of love, and we're just so excited to be here to share what we've been working on with everybody. I wear a lot of hats in the rare disease space, but I think the one that is most relevant here is that I'm Philip's mom. I have a son who's 8, cutest thing in the world, and he's a patient in the UDN, was seen at the Stanford site and remains undiagnosed, still in the program. But I found the UDN as a mom after about 2 years which is a relatively short diagnostic odyssey that I suspect many on the call can relate to. I also have the incredible honor of serving as the current chair of the board of directors of the UDN Foundation and former co-chair of the UDN Peer Group with Sarah and previously with Troy. I also have a day job where I am a researcher in the Center for Biomedical Ethics at Stanford University, where I do research on ethical issues related to research and clinical care with patients with rare and undiagnosed diseases. So that's me. Troy, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Troy Evans. I first noticed symptoms which led to my currently undiagnosed disease about 17 years ago. So I definitely have a horse in the race here as a participant in this rare and undiagnosed space. One of the symptoms today that I have is things like hand tremors, and it's actually turned into a great silver lining, because when my hands shake on a date or during a presentation like this, I just get to blame it on the disease and not any sort of nervousness. But I'm from Utah, and in 2018, I was fortunate to visit the UCLA clinical site of the UDN. To date, I am currently undiagnosed with some sort of a muscle weakness or muscular atrophy type disease. Like many of you, the road, or my road to the UDN, was very long, frustrating, expensive, included a lot of Google searches. And after beginning evaluation by the UDN in 2019, I was able to join UDN PEER with a number of those that are also on the call with us today. And in 2020 and 2021, was able to be a UDN PEER co-chair. And then since then, I've also been a founding member of the UDNF with Megan and Helene, and also Christina Casanova-Might. I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to be part of this discussion and to share the progress of the UDNF. And I thank you for letting me join you.
And my name is Helen Cederoth, and I'm from Sweden. I live in Sweden, in Europe. And so it's night here, and I'm very proud and honored to be with you all. I don't know you yet, but I hope I will know you soon. And I'm a mother of 3 children who suffered from an undiagnosed disease, and they passed away when they were 16 years old. Our Wilhelm and Emma, the year after, she became only 6 years old, and Hugo 2 years after Emma. And we visited when they were alive. We visited Johns Hopkins for 2 weeks, but they couldn't find anything, and everything was okay. So I have struggled with this undiagnosed diseases many, many years now, and they are still undiagnosed. And 2013, I went to Dr. Gal to try to see if we could do something with him. And then our children they passed away in 1999 and 2000 and 2002. So it's a long time ago. But we started International Conference on Rare and Undiagnosed Diseases together with Bill Gall. And then we have, I'm a co-founder of UDNI, which is copy, but not as great as your UDN is, but I'm proud of UDNI too. And then I'm a very honored board member to UDNF. And I hope I can contribute with my knowledge and my international knowledge, and also to be a part of this Undiagnosed Disease Network. Thank you.
Wonderful. I know all of you, some to a greater extent than others, but it just fills my heart and makes me so excited that you're here and that this UDNF is being born, so to speak. So many patients and families, like the speakers have said, have been on a long diagnostic journey, an odyssey that hasn't rendered any answers yet. And so I think the UDNF is hopefully will be a huge piece in patient support going forward. And I know there's been a lot of talk on our Facebook group with UDN and UDN patients, and perhaps even among the UDN community about there's a lot of piecemeal information about what is UDNF and so forth. So Megan, maybe you can start with just giving people kind of an overview and a context of where UDNF came from and how it came to be.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Is that my cue to start my slides? Perfect, okay. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully I will do it correctly. All right, Sarah, can you just give me a thumbs up if it looks okay? All right, thank you. My task today is to give a brief overview of what the UDNF is and a little bit of history, though we really want to leave a lot of time for questions. I know Sarah and Stephanie were going to pose some questions for discussion, and we'd welcome questions from the audience as well. And just to give you a sense of what I'm going to touch on today, and I will make my slides go forward, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what the UDN is, who we are, just a smattering of the history, and talk a bit about our values and what we really see this organization embodying in the years to come. Then we'll talk a bit about specific goals, including programming that we are planning to launch over the next few years. And then, as I mentioned, leave plenty of time for question and answer. So to give you just a bit of an overview, we are an organization that was founded by and for patients with undiagnosed and ultra-rare conditions, including both those in the current Undiagnosed Diseases Network and those who, for a variety of reasons, are not part of the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. We, after much discussion and not so much debate, but just mulling over what the goals should be, we've landed on a mission that is to improve access to diagnosis, research, and care for all with undiagnosed and ultra-rare conditions. As part of this mission, we seek to facilitate partnerships between patients, clinicians, and scientists to benefit not only those who are able to be a part of those partnerships, but also to help facilitate the knowledge gained through those partnerships translate into clinical care for the broader undiagnosed and rare disease community. We are also specifically focused on identifying and mitigating barriers to access to research and care for undiagnosed and ultra-rare conditions. Our vision is really ideally that the UDNF will not need to exist in the future, but we do have a vision for what we think healthcare that really serves our community would look like. And we see that as healthcare that, as opposed to shrinks from the unknown, embraces it, and pursues clinical and research solutions for patient well-being. While diagnosis is a piece of what the UDNF will focus on, we recognize that many of the families who are part of the UDN and the broader undiagnosed and ultra-rare community need much more than just a diagnosis. They need support for managing their day-to-day care needs. They may need mentorship and support, either social support from a community or help accessing existing social services that they may be eligible for, but may face challenges due to a lack of diagnosis in accessing. We see this healthcare of the future that we hope to build as really a learning healthcare network, one that leverages the advances of science, technology, and service delivery, and is constantly iterating and improving on itself to provide the best possible care for patients and families. As I mentioned, we are led by and for patients and their families. Our board of directors is by charter will always be at least 51%, made up of at least 51% of individuals who are undiagnosed or ultra-rare patients themselves or close family members of such patients. We seek to be a central resource for the undiagnosed community, and one that is very consumer focused, including both children and adults and their families. We will focus, and this is very intentional, on the US healthcare context, at least in our initial years. And this is in part due to the unique challenges that we face in terms of access and reimbursement in the healthcare system in the US. That being said, as Helene so nicely described, the international partnership is going to be critical to our success, and so we have every intention of partnering with and developing collaborations with our international colleagues. Just for those of you who may not be as familiar with the history of the UDN and kind of how we've gotten here and where we're going, I just want to give you a very brief very brief history. So for those of you who may not be as familiar, the Undiagnosed Diseases Network started as the Undiagnosed Diseases Program within the NIH, led by Dr. Bill Gall and others who you heard Helene refer to earlier. And then in 2013, through funding from what's called the Common Fund in the NIH, the internal UDP was expanded to a number of clinical sites across the United States, and expanded the capacity of the Undiagnosed Diseases Program to see more patients. It was shortly after that, in large part through the efforts of Helene and Bill and others, that the UDNI was formed, and of which the UDN is a member, among other groups across the world. In 2018, what we are now referring to as UDN 2.0 came into being. That was an expansion of the clinical sites of the UDN to the current 12 sites. That was really kind of the full force of the network at the time. But we knew even then that the support from the Common Fund was time limited to 10 years, and that we needed to be thinking about, and by we, I was not engaged at the time, but those who were leading the network were very aware that they needed to be thinking about sustainability and how to ensure that the resources and tools of the UDN remained available to the broader community, and ideally would be expanded and would become more accessible. So as part of the effort to move towards a vision for UDN 3.0, the UDNF was founded and by Helene and myself and Troy, who at the time were the PEER co-chairs. So this is really an outgrowth of PEER. It is a very much belonging to and of the patients and families in this program. With the guidance and support of Christina Might, who Troy mentioned earlier, and the support of the UDN investigators, and particularly the coordinating center, we were encouraged to really make the UDNF the voice of the patients and families, to provide us with a seat at the table and an opportunity to help guide the UDN 3.0, which is very much a work in progress. You mentioned values earlier, and this is something that we've taken very seriously and has been a core piece of our discussions around what we really want the UDNF to do and be. I would encourage you to just take a look through the values as they're constructed, as they're listed on the slide, and note that innovation and discovery and science is certainly a big part of what we intend to do. Partnership and collaboration will continue to be core, but we are also of equal importance to us is being patient and family centered, to ensuring that all patients and families are treated with compassion, empathy, and respect. Issues of social justice and increasing access for patients and families who have faced challenges in accessing good diagnostic care, as well as clinical care more broadly, as well as integrity and transparency, ensuring that the community to whom the UDNF belongs and will belong is fully aware of what we are doing and how we are doing it, and what our goals are as we move forward. So in terms of those goals, we have just recently completed, and I know at least some folks on the call today played a huge part in helping us to develop these goals, 4 key goals that will be the focus of the next few years. Of course, organizational growth and sustainability. We're going to grow into a sustainable, high-impact nonprofit organization that collaborates with a network of clinical sites and research cores. That is the goal. That is one of our key goals, of course. A second central goal in the next few years is community engagement and outreach. We really want to expand on the incredible work that UDN PEER has done to continue to build a community that's buy-in for all patients with undiagnosed and ultra-rare diseases and their families. We want to serve as a leading resource for trustworthy information about diagnosis and for the undiagnosed and for ultra rare diseases and services, and ensure that underrepresented patients have equitable access to diagnosis, opportunities for therapeutics, research, and support. Our third goal is focused on patient and family navigation. I know it's no secret to many of the folks on the call today that navigation through the diagnostic odyssey can be an incredible challenge. And while the UDN has done some really important work in helping in that direction, there's a lot more that we can do. And so as a patient and family-centric organization, we look forward to being able to expand the navigation services provided by the network and to augment what's already there, to improve the patient and family experience of the diagnostic process, support access to not just diagnosis, but improved medical management, care coordination, social services, community support and mental health services, and to assist with not only the diagnostic process, but also that transition to therapeutics, if that is what the patient and family desires. We're also excited to explore consolidated tools and strategies across undiagnosed and ultra rare disease communities. With the, sorry, there's some beeping at my office, with the kind of ultimate goal of expanding and advancing patient-centered research and clinical care. We want to make the diagnosis of ultra rare diseases ultimately more accessible, equitable, accurate, and efficient, and advance the diagnosis and knowledge of ultra rare diseases. And just a brief overview of some of the programming that we're planning over the next few years. As I mentioned, sustaining and strengthening the UDN itself will be one of our goals. That's in part in response to the end of the Common Fund and sustainability, and as a part of sustainability, the planning that's been going on for a long time. We'll be involved in fundraising, developing protocols, helping to centralize communications for patients and families, and advocating for underserved patients. As I mentioned, we'll also be expanding on patient and family navigation so that it's available at any point in a patient's journey for both the undiagnosed and the ultra rare, helping to navigate not only diagnosis, but also research, care, and therapeutics. And we have a plan to bring on bilingual navigators, as well as to work closely with other resources for language translation to increase access for non-English language speaking populations. We also are in the process of developing community outreach and education protocols, supporting professional development so that more clinicians in the community know how to identify an undiagnosed patient and how to support them, providing more central sources of information, and doing partnership building with some of the many really excellent rare disease patient communities, both small and large, that are already working in the rare disease landscape. I just want to flash up this slide in case you are interested in learning more, getting involved. I want to say that a few things. You can always reach out to anyone on the webinar today. We are very Googleable, but Adeline Dunberg, who I have to thank for these beautiful slides, as well as her partner, Joe. Adeline Dunberg will be joining the foundation as the inaugural director of operations. She has been is a longtime nonprofit expert and has been helping to organize and coach Helene, Troy, myself, and other board members through this initial process. We also do have a website, udnf.org. It is very much a work in progress. There are blanks that will be filled. There is content that will be modified, but we welcome the community here today to begin to explore that with the caveat that please understand that it's still a work in progress. But there is an opportunity to volunteer. There's a sign up opportunity to volunteer there, and also an opportunity to sign up for the newsletter to stay informed as things do move forward. Because we are in the very early stages, and this is really, I think Sarah referred to it as the head is crowning. This is Sarah's a doula too. This is really very much a work in progress, and we welcome community input. And with that, I just want to share, this is our contact information. If you'd like additional information, our website is there. And we are the founding board and the current board members and the peer group you know, we have really committed to this organization, and we think it's possible that we will do this until rare is not a barrier, and we hope you will join us. With that, I will stop sharing, I think, so we can see each other, and turn it back over to you, Sarah and Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Megan. You know, what really sticks out to me in your talk, and things that we've talked about too, is how the UDNF will be there, has been created to serve the ultra rare and the undiagnosed community. And I think oftentimes the ultra rare and undiagnosed don't have a home. There's a lot of rare diseases that have homes. Muscular dystrophy has a home, and you know, different rare diseases have organizations specifically for them. And so just wondering if, and maybe Helene, you could talk about, I mean, you have been on the long haul of an undiagnosed journey and finding community and places to belong in this undiagnosed space. I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about, you know, how important that's been to you over time and how that's evolved to where we're at today.
Yes, thank you. The beginning was horrible. When in 1999, no one talked about undiagnosed. It was nothing. So it was bad. And then we started we founded UDN Foundation. I forgot to mention that. my baby too. I have many babies. UDNF and UDNI and UDN Foundation. So, but then they didn't talk about it. No foundation, no umbrella organizations talk about undiagnosed. We had a professor in Sweden who talked about it, but he called us anonymous and said, now you have a diagnosis like you can compare with others, but it was not like that. It was horrible because we are not an anonymous. We are undiagnosed and we want a diagnosis. So, but then in 2013, something happened. Then people began to talk about it more in Europe. And then we also found in US and we saw the Undiagnosed Disease Program. And that was the golden standard for us. So, and it was a hope that this could be something. And maybe, and Dr. Gall talked about the UDN network who started then after 2013. And, but I think when you are undiagnosed, now we have this 2021, it was a United Nations resolution for rare and undiagnosed, for rare diseases, not undiagnosed, for rare diseases and families, but they talk about the undiagnosed. It is important to have a diagnosis, but I hope we together can bring in the undiagnosed there too, since the undiagnosed are left behind. We are, and we know that, and the community know that we are left behind, all the undiagnosed. And hopefully we can find a community together, because we all need a community.
Yeah, and what I love what you said, that I hear it oftentimes that, you know, working with Bill Gall and UDN and UDNI, is that it gave you hope. That hope is something that you didn't have before, because you're isolated and, you know, anonymous, which, like you said, we're not anonymous, we're undiagnosed. That hope is something that I think that UDN has brought to patients and families, and certainly I think UDNF is hoping to expand that hope. And I want to remind people that they can put questions into the chat. We do have a couple of questions. Megan, do you want to tackle that first question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And thanks to Megan Taverner for asking your questions. And I see you're a member of the ultra rare community yourself with your child. So thank you for joining us. I think you're raising a really critical issue that patients and their caregivers face so many barriers in communicating with healthcare providers.
Megan, I'm sorry, could you just repeat the question quick? Sorry, just so people have context for the answer that you're providing. I didn't read the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. They can't. Yes. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I forgot that everyone can't see. So Megan says, how would the organization be able to support those individuals needing advocacy and medical provider and with medical providers unfamiliar with their conditions, avoidance of accusations in the pursuit of knowledge, uses of medicinal versus medicines versus over-medicating to band-aid unknown symptoms. And then she identifies herself as a parent of an 8-year-old with ASXL2 Shashi-Pena syndrome, which I'm not familiar with that specific syndrome. Says there's been a lot of unusual symptoms. Absolutely, I think there's so many issues to touch on here. I think there's the question of whether a diagnosis actually solves this issue for some families. I think because some of these diagnoses are so incredibly rare. I was just speaking with a mom yesterday who had a very ultra rare first in the world diagnosis, and she was saying we're kind of in the same boat we were before, and what we really need is support in care coordination and in getting all of our providers on the same page, and in setting goals of care and making decisions. These are exactly the types of issues that the UDNF wants to develop supports for. We also know that patients in the UDN have, unfortunately, a small but important number have faced challenges in getting their providers to move forward and do additional diagnostics and testing because they know the UDN is working on things, which is not how things should go. And so we're hoping to increase the communication and provide more tools and supports for families and in general. And then in addition, I mentioned the Navigator program, and that's actually something that Sarah and others in the patient community have been already working to develop. Essentially a one-on-one person who provides a family with kind of whatever they need. So kind of that extra person who is your second brain as a parent or as a patient, someone who can advocate, who can track down resources on your behalf, can help to advocate for you, can essentially be there for what you need, and who has experience and knowledge of the specific challenges that, while we're all so unique, we all also share many of these same challenges in how we access the healthcare system. So those are really the challenges that we're hoping to tackle. Thanks.
Troy or Megan, this question is for either of you. How do you really envision, I know you talked about how PEER is really, is one of the things that kind of gave idea to the UDNF existing. So, UDN PEER still exists and UDNF now exists. How do you see those two groups working together?
Yeah, maybe I can start and Megan can fill in any gaps that might be in there. One thing that I think is incredibly valuable is the thing that brings all of us together here is the specialty of the people involved with the UDN. And so we're drawn to this network in the first place out of a need, and we're drawn to it because of the superior level of service and diagnostic tools and things that are available within the UDN. A step further than that is something that's happening, I think, across all rare disease space is patient advocacy and patient groups that are leading out in trying to help bridge the gap with navigators, with scientists, with researchers to help expose more about what goes on in the life of a patient or a participant in a program like this. UDN PEER is a perfect example of that was set up at the onset of the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. Sarah and Stephanie are the co-chairs, and I know that there's an excellent team that assists you on that. I've had the opportunity to be a part of UDN PEER in the past, and it was pretty life-changing because of the people I was able to associate with and the ways that we were able to try to make that difference for participants in general. And so I think that there's this growing level of patient advocacy and the effectiveness that can come from that. UDNF is building upon that same type of patient advocacy. It's led for and by participants and patients that are undiagnosed or ultra rare, as Megan talked about. And the relationship will continue to be because of those patient advocates that like each of us. UDNF is looking to expand upon all of the work that PEER has done. And I believe that PEER will continue to remain in effect in its relationship directly with the UDN under the care of the coordinating center.
Megan, anything you want to add to that, or Helene? It was very well put, Troy. One of the things, kind of a question that comes up for me, and something again that I know I've talked about in kind of UDN peer circles is, how patients can help drive care. That historically in the US and perhaps around the world, it's really been systems and providers that have driven care. And I think, UDN PEER certainly has acted to really, and really because of UDN PIs, they, came up with the idea of patients really being an active part of the network, that patients really can change care. And I'm just wondering if you can comment more on that, any one of you, how you see that happening and why that happens and why it's important.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have seen it from outside, and I have seen what you have done. It's amazing. And at the conferences, the UDN are talking about PEER and what you have done. And I think you have done it together with them and not as a part, as not as something that you have to put in the, that we are working with patient check. So you have done an amazing work, and I think you have been leader for every other organizations. They are looking at what you are doing. So thank you. Thank
you, Helene.
Sarah, could I jump in on a couple of questions that are in the Q&A?
Oh yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm having an issue with your sound. I don't know if it's just me, but sorry if I interrupted you. But there are a couple of questions in the chat that I wanted to kind of respond to in a global way. So one participant is asking a question about, I was previously seen at the UDP. Can I be seen at another site? What happens there? We have someone else whose child was diagnosed with an ultra rare condition that is published a website and is looking to connect with others and talk about what they're doing. And I think that both of those are great examples of ways that the UDNF wants to try to support patients and families. So, and I'm not going to call her out by name, but to the person who was asking the question about, we were seen at the UDP, what happens next? Right now, we have the coordinating center at the UDN. So today, the person to reach out to would be Paul Mazur at the coordinating center. He's on our webinar, and he works very closely with the UDNF and the UDN peer group. If you haven't met Paul, is literally the most responsive person on the planet, and is always happy to help answer those types of questions about where am I at in the process. And I can promise you, if he doesn't know the answer, he will find it out for you. And then to the parent who is trying to move things forward for their child's rare condition, part of the inspiration, if you will, for the UDNF, and I like to think of the U as doing double duty for undiagnosed and ultra rare. We'll have to work on that down the road, but is, thinking about sustainability, not just of the UDN per se, but we are, even just within the network, have identified, I don't know, what is it, 30 some plus brand new diseases. And that's just our research group. There's, this is happening on a daily basis around the country and around the world. And it's a lot, it's frankly too much to put on patients and families to say, great, we got you this diagnosis. Now, if you want a therapy, you just have to go and start a foundation and raise a bunch of money and find the researchers and figure out the FDA and learn all the science. Well, I think parents do incredible things, patients do incredible things to move the science forward. It's an equity issue, and frankly, just a fairness issue to have that be the only option. And so part of what UDNF is envisioning in the long term is to support a pipeline where patients and families anywhere along the diagnostic and therapeutic odyssey can come for resources and support, so that they don't have to do everything on their own all the time. And so those are I'm touching on some of the additional issues that we hope to get to as we grow as an organization. But that is very much part of our vision of this organization long term. I know I didn't directly answer the two questions of the folks involved, but you can also always feel free to reach out on your individual cases to anyone on the call today, and we're happy to follow up. And then there's also a question about supports for IEPs and for those types of things. Sarah, actually, would you mind taking that question?
Yeah, we have if we don't get to your question today, we do have quite a few questions in the chat. So let me just scroll back up to that. Well, so that is an issue, I think, that navigators once hired at UDNF, which is a little ways off, I think can help families with. But so in my professional life, I'm a medical case manager. And so I do a lot of what I personally envision the navigators to be doing with families once that program is set up. But there is an organization called PACER. It's PACER.org. And they actually are in Minnesota, but they're a national resource, and there's a ton of information about IEPs, 504s. You can call to speak to an advocate about your child's educational needs, and they will, a lot of times you have to leave a message, but they will call you back in my experience. So I would really encourage you to reach out to them, but certainly I hope that the UDNF does have, these patient navigators that they're envisioning, and that there will be this one-to-one help. And I really think that's what, in part, what will set UDNF, one of the things that will set UDNF apart from other rare disease organizations that have been great and that we partner with all the time. EveryLife, NORD being two big ones. But I think that's what will help hopefully set us apart. And hopefully that doesn't fully answer your question, but hopefully at least directs you to someplace that you can get your questions answered. I did want to ask, there's, as you know, there was an $18 million appropriation from Congress set to the NIH that was directed to fund, to continue funding for the UDN. And I'm wondering how that funding might impact the UDNF. Megan or Troy? Go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, so Megan touched a little bit on the NIH Common Fund funding that was financially supporting the UDN. The Common Fund funding, the UDN knew had an expiration date, and the UDN was left in a very interesting position along with the NIH. other NIH programs that have been supported through the Common Fund have not been near as successful as the UDN. So the need to continue a program after Common Fund funding expired was greatly enhanced with the UDN compared to maybe some other programs that have been associated in the past. We knew that that was coming. So a number of you on the call and a number of other participants at the UDN began doing a number of things, including federal legislative advocacy. Part of the UDNF was born out of the advocacy that was already going on and taking place. But as you probably all know, there was some excellent and amazing news that came out of the 2023 federal budget that included a line item for future sustainability of the UDN by way of $18 million. Now that is in the 2023 budget. I think that we can all hope that that will continue to be in future budgets. There's not a guarantee, but we believe and have a lot of hope that that will continue to be the case. So the dire need, or the urgent need that we were all expressing due to the Common Fund expiration is in many ways subsided because of this additional funding. Now, I know that the UDN and the NIH are still working very closely on how those funds will be allotted and allocated to the UDN, and I'm sure that there'll be some more news that a lot of us will hear in the future. We hope that a lot of that news will include reopening of sites for evaluation of participants moving forward and things like that. But it's definitely, in my opinion, the $18 million is a sign of a couple of things. One is the great success of the UDN. Two is the great need to continue the program because there's so many that remain undiagnosed. And three is the voice of the participants and the advocacy that was done by so many working with legislators and with Congress to find solutions to continue the UDN. So I think it shows the power of all of us and our voice. And I believe that the continued success will happen again in the future because of work of UDN PEER and UDNF, among many other things.
Yeah, thanks for that, Troy. If I could just add quickly, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you know, when we all received the news of the appropriation, we were beyond delighted. And you know, I hope it's clear from what we've shared today that the UDNF was not founded just to keep the UDN afloat. That certainly is one of the goals, and they're a very critical partner. But you know, they've put this in the hands of patients and families have taken the rein in order to have a seat at the table in how that the next version of the UDN evolves. And I think I just want to point to a question that did come through in the chat that I think highlights this really nicely. That's from, oh no, I'd scroll down, from Lisa. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your last name, Trelevan, who says that she'd love to see a resource for undiagnosed patients like her daughter regarding self-advocacy and patient education on the topic of scope of medical consent, especially about topics with controversial applications or large potential for future unseen applications like stem cells. She says that patients and families are often desperate for answers and are highly motivated to consent to genetics research. And I think that education is needed to ensure they are understanding the full implications of that to which they are consenting. I could not agree with that sentiment more. I think that that is a hugely important topic, and one that I will say myself as an ethicist is particularly interested in. And that's part of why we titled this talk Centering Patients and Families in Research and Care, Diagnosis, Research and Care. The only way to really develop ways of consenting and communicating about research is to engage the patients and families in that planning and in that process. And the UDNF will provide the opportunity and the structure that will give, as I mentioned, give patients and families a seat at the table, and provide that type of support, not just for participants in the UDN necessarily, but for thinking about how to best structure and support and center patients and families in clinical genomics research more broadly.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling down to see. So one question is, will these resources be available to families who continue to be undiagnosed but are not part of the UDN? I know you touched on that a little bit, but I don't know if you can speak more to that.
Do you want me to take that one, Helene and Troy, or you want somebody else want to jump in? Okay. That is a great question, and that's something that we're thinking about a lot. We recognize that for a variety of reasons, the access to the UDN itself has been way more limited than it needs to be. The need is much greater, and many of the resources that the UDNF will provide will not be unique to UDN participants. I'd say we're partly on this webinar to recognizing that we understand the urgency, of this need. And we also are we're moving as fast as we can, but it will take us some time to expand the scope. The goal absolutely is to move beyond just participants in the UDN, and for this to be a resource that's available to all patients and families across the undiagnosed and ultra-rare community. That is the goal. That is absolutely our vision for this. In the next couple of years, as we're getting up and running, there may be some initial phases where we will pilot programs with current UDN participants. We also may pilot programs with other individuals outside the UDN, if that makes sense. But the short answer is yes. The longer answer is, it will take us some time, but yes. Helene or Troy, do you want to add anything to that?
I would second everything that was said. Yes, there's a number of things, and some of them are being brought up in the Q&A that are they're a focus of the UDNF because of the voice of all of us as participants. So please continue to make that voice known so that need is made aware. It is a focus. It is a priority of the UDNF. Patient navigators, assistance with self-advocacy, support groups, all of those things are definitely something that the UDNF has in our sights and is aiming to help assist and accomplish with.
We just have a few minutes left in the hour here. I know, Megan, you're kind of helping me go through the Q&A. So if you see one that...
Yeah, I would just maybe quickly respond in our last few minutes to Bonnie Caswell Lyles, who says that her son is the only male in the world, along with 3 girls who have their diagnosis. And the UDN, she says the UDN has hooked us up when I'm assuming that's when he was here, about donating his brain for future research. And they really have done so much for us. However, I love doing research too for myself. And I want to know without a doubt that the latest results that were on his diagnosis, we got, so essentially saying, how do I, I'm happy to help. I want to support these types of things, but I also want to know what's going on. I also want to make sure that, we have the resources we need to care for my son. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, Bonnie, but that's at least how I'm reading the question. And I think that, that is absolutely touches on something that we are very focused on, which is, you get a diagnosis, and then what? How do you the academic literature, I know because I write in it, it's really hard to navigate. It's not even accessible to many people, which is a huge problem. And so the UDNF, one of the goals of the UDNF is to, again, through this navigator mechanism, be able to provide individualized support for patients and families, as well as provide shared resources. And to increase access and communication with providers and researchers with whom these patients and families are partnering with, to really provide that conduit for communication and updates as they come, so that it takes some of the burden off. It's wonderful that you love to do research too. I certainly am that type myself, but not everybody can or wants to do that. And so, how can we level the playing field? is part of what we're thinking about. And so thanks for the great question.
And can I just add something to that, Megan? As you know, again, I've been working with the UDNF some on this idea of a patient navigator and resources. And really, I think one of the biggest pieces that the patient navigator can lend to families is time, because it's not that people don't want to, and not even always that people don't know how to do it. It's time. It is so, for anyone that lives the diagnostic odyssey, you just know it takes a long time to make calls, to figure out who the right person is to call. And so hopefully not only will these navigators help you navigate and answer questions and find resources, but also be able to lend you some time so that you don't have to spend all of your waking hours outside of maybe your paid job and being a parent or a patient yourself to help you, along that way. So I just wanted to add that.
And yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. And I would just also take the opportunity to connect that to the last question here in the chat is, how do you persevere? It's one, and let me say that this is one that speaks to me. I know it speaks to Troy and Helene and many, the 70% who remain undiagnosed even after going through the UDN. Jennifer Daly Sear says, you spoke about the experience of the challenges and hurdles once diagnosis is received. What's the research guidance on how to persevere when undiagnosed? She says she's only 8.5 years into the unknown, navigating without a GPS. So part of what the UDNF hopes to provide for families is somewhat of a GPS. Is, let's look at what you've done so far. Let's look at what your most pressing needs are. Let's look at the landscape of research and clinical care that's out there, either on a symptoms basis and then also on a diagnostic basis, and think about, okay, what are the next steps? And then this is a rapidly evolving landscape. I'm sure many of you are aware of how quickly we are adding tools to our toolkit around diagnosis. Every time I sit in on one of the UDN meetings, I feel so hopeful about that every patient will get some sort of a diagnosis at some point. The science is really that spectacular. And so, but we have to keep patients and families in the loop. We need to be able to provide them with updates and so that they don't feel like you have to be navigating without a GPS. You know where to come to. You know that if there is a new opportunity that fits you, you will have the opportunity to. You will be provided with the support and access and navigation to those types of opportunities. And so I love that. I love that analogy of a GPS because there's such a need for that, whether you have a diagnosis or not.
Maybe we could end on just this question, and I feel like any of you could answer this. And one thing I touched on earlier this week in talking to you guys is there's so much out there. How do you get people outside of the rare undiagnosed diseases to be interested in the cause? And especially in a world where there's so much negative going on and there's so much compassion fatigue that people can say like, oh, well, that's too bad about your son, or that's too bad about, you and this illness. How do you kind of hook people in to really care and be able to put that compassion fatigue aside to donate money, to donate their time or what have you? How do you have ideas on how to kind of hook people in?
Really?
I don't have any ideas, but I feel exactly the same, and everybody I have talked to has the same, who are undiagnosed, said the same. How can we do? And I wish I knew. I really wish I know, since the community needs and all the undiagnosed needs to be seen. since the undiagnosed are left behind. And now we have discussion with the United Nations, and we hope that we can do something to bring the undiagnosed into this community who are working with this. And I think UDNF can be great to do that. I hope so.
I would also just add that, you know, something that PEER has done so effectively is share stories. I think for those who are not aware of, I was one of them until my son was referred, aren't even aware that being undiagnosed is a thing. You know, sharing the stories of these families and the patients and families is really, I see it as a very effective tool, both the community sharing with each other and also sharing with the broader either healthcare provider landscape, researchers, or the public. I think it helps to illustrate really how complex these issues are. So I'm aware we're close to time, Sarah. I don't know if you want to wrap us up.
Or do you want to say, I don't want to cut you off if you have something, you know, pressing or brilliant to say, which I'm sure you do.
I don't. I think we're all in a similar situation as that. That's something that we're all experiencing, and that might come from friends, it might come from family, it might even come from caregivers or doctors or specialists. That self-advocacy is very important. We need to not give up. This is a tough thing that we're all dealing with, but there's science is moving forward, science is progressing. Answers will come for many, hopefully sooner than later. So I think some of those, that compassion fatigue that might come from others might be out of ignorance in some ways. So we start with a bit of forgiveness toward that and continue to keep our head up and not give up.
What a great way to end. Anyway, thank you so much, Megan, Troy, Helene, for joining us and just shedding some light on the UDNF and the hope that it gives to the undiagnosed. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
And,
thanks, everyone.
And if we didn't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to anyone on the call.
UDNF.org. There should be links to email, specific people, or if you're on the Facebook group, Stephanie and I are also, and Megan and Troy are also on the Facebook group. So thank you.